A little boy slipped a note into a biker's pocket in a crowded diner, 4 words that said, "He isn't my dad." What Tank Walker found in that alley 3 minutes later would expose a predator, uncover a missing father, and prove that sometimes the most dangerous-looking man in the room is the only one brave enough to save a life. Under the harsh neon and fluorescent lights of the Dusty Spoon diner, something extraordinary was about to happen. Most people wouldn't notice it. They'd see the refilled coffee mugs, hear the clinking of cutlery against chipped ceramic plates, smell the grease from the fryer mixing with burnt toast and cheap cologne. They'd glance at the faded vinyl booths, the scratched formica tables, the old Wurlitzer jukebox humming Merle Haggard in the corner. They'd see a Sunday afternoon in small-town Oklahoma, ordinary, forgettable, safe. But the world has a way of being wrong about what's safe. And today, it was about to be proven wrong again. Because the world thinks it knows who the monster is. It sees the patches, the leather, the ink, the beard, the boots, and it decides. It crosses the street. It locks the car doors. It whispers to its children, "Stay close." But sometimes the man the world fears most is the only one willing to do what's right. If you believe in brotherhood, second chances, and the idea that sometimes the hero wears the colors everyone's been taught to run from, then this story is for you. Tank Walker sat in the back corner booth with his spine pressed against cracked vinyl and his eyes on the door. Old habit. Marine habit. 6'5", 260 pounds of scarred knuckles, faded tattoos, and a beard like a storm cloud that hadn't broken yet. His leather vest hung heavy on his shoulders, deep yellow and red, Bandidos MC, Oklahoma stitched across the back in bold letters that made people nervous just reading them. He didn't blame them. He looked like trouble. He knew that. Hell, some days he felt like trouble. But today wasn't one of those days. Today, he just wanted coffee, a slice of pecan pie, and maybe a few quiet minutes before the charity ride. They were heading out to raise money for homeless vets and kids in the foster system, men who came home to nothing, kids the system had chewed up and spit out. Tank knew both stories too well. He'd been one of those men once, came back from Fallujah with a chest full of medals and a head full of ghosts, no family waiting, no job lined up, just a government check, a bottle of Jack, and the slow, suffocating realization that the war had followed him home. It was the bandidos who pulled him out of that hole, gave him brothers when blood had failed him, gave him a code when the world felt lawless, gave him a reason to wake up and ride instead of lying in bed waiting for the ceiling to collapse. Now, he tried to do the same for others. Across the diner, his brothers settled into their own booths, Bear, Ghost, Wrench, Tiny, Colt, and Reaper. All vets. All men who'd traded one uniform for another. They joked low, voices rumbling like distant thunder, planning the route, checking their phones, sipping burnt coffee like it was the best thing they'd tasted all week. The waitress, middle-aged, tired, kind eyes, refilled Tank's mug without asking. She didn't flinch when his hand brushed hers. She'd seen them before, knew they tipped well, didn't start fights, and once helped her nephew fix his truck for free when he couldn't afford the shop. But the couple in the booth near the register? They stared, whispered. The woman clutched her purse a little tighter. Tank didn't react. He'd learned a long time ago that you can't change people's minds by staring back. You change them by proving them wrong. The door chime rang. Tank's eyes flicked up another old habit. Always know who's coming in, always know where the exits are. A man walked in first, mid-30s maybe. Buzz-cut, surplus military jacket with a couple of patches stitched on crooked, dog tags hanging outside his shirt like a billboard. He had that forced swagger some guys get when they're trying too hard to look like something they're not. Tank's jaw tightened. Stolen valor. He could smell it from across the room. But it was the kid that made Tank's chest go cold. A boy, 8, maybe 9 years old. Messy brown hair that looked like someone had cut it with kitchen scissors, clothes too big, like hand-me-downs from a stranger. His face was pale, his eyes too wide, too tired for a kid his age. And his wrist, Tank saw it when the man yanked him toward a booth, had a faint ring of bruises, purple and yellow, like fingerprints burned into skin. The boy's eyes swept the diner, and then they locked on Tank. Not with fear, not with curiosity, with pleading. Tank looked away, took a sip of coffee, told himself it wasn't his business. But the boy didn't stop looking. He drifted closer, slow, like he was pretending to be interested in the gumball machine near Tank's booth. The fake dad was busy ordering, barking at the waitress, not paying attention. The boy stood there, small hands hovering over the machine's glass dome, but his eyes, those desperate, exhausted eyes, stayed on Tank. Tank's pulse kicked up. Something was wrong. Every instinct he'd honed in Fallujah, every gut feeling that had kept him alive when mortars screamed overhead, was screaming now. The boy stepped closer, bumped into Tank's arm. "Sorry, sir," he whispered, voice shaking, barely audible. And in that half-second, Tank felt it, the boy's hand, slipping something into the pocket of his vest. Fast, practiced, desperate. Tank didn't move, didn't look down, didn't react. The boy shuffled back toward the man, who grabbed his shoulder too hard and shoved him into the booth. Tank's hand slid into his vest pocket. His fingers closed around a folded napkin. He waited. Watched the boy sit stiff and silent across from the man. Watched the man's eyes dart around the room like a caged animal, looking for an exit. Then Tank unfolded the napkin under the table. The handwriting was large, jagged, shaky, like it had been written in a moving car or by a hand that couldn't stop trembling. "Please help me. He isn't my dad." The diner sounds faded. The clinking forks, the low hum of conversation, Merle Haggard crooning about Mama Tried. All of it disappeared. Tank's heart slammed against his ribs, his vision tunneled. For a split second, he was back in a dusty street in Iraq, staring at a little girl with the same look in her eyes, the same silent scream for help he hadn't been fast enough to answer. Not again. He looked up. The boy was staring at him, eyes wet, lips pressed tight like he was trying not to cry. Tank's hand closed around the napkin, crumpled it into his fist. He could walk away, call the cops, let the system handle it. But the system was slow. The system asked questions. The system let kids fall through cracks wide enough to swallow them whole. And Tank had spent too many years watching good people wait for permission to do the right thing. He wasn't waiting anymore. Tank put the napkin in his fist, felt it crumple against his palm, and knew there was no walking away from this. Not today. Not ever.
Please click the subscribe button and show us your support. We have a goal of 1 to 9 subscribers.
Tank Walker had learned to read men in places where reading them wrong meant body bags. Fallujah, Ramadi, Helmand Province. Places where a smile could hide a suicide vest, where a handshake could end with a knife in your ribs, where you learned to trust your gut or you didn't come home. And right now, his gut was screaming. The man across the diner, fake dog tags glinting under fluorescent lights, was all wrong. The patches on his jacket were mismatched. 82nd Airborne insignia next to a Navy SEAL trident. Ranks that didn't line up. A combat infantryman badge sewn upside down. No real vet would make those mistakes. Tank had seen this before. Guys who bought their service at army surplus stores stitched together a fantasy and wore it like armor. Most were harmless, sad, desperate for respect they hadn't earned. But this one wasn't harmless. This one had a terrified kid with bruises on his wrist. Tank's brothers had already clocked it. Bear's eyes flicked toward the man, then back to Tank. A silent question. Tank gave a small nod. "We're watching." Ghost shifted in his seat, angling his body toward the door. Wrench moved to the counter, blocking the kitchen exit. Tiny stood near the front window, arms crossed, looking like a mountain that had decided to wear a leather vest. They didn't need words. They'd been brothers long enough to speak in glances, in shifts of weight, in the tilt of a head. This was what the bandidos did, what they'd always done. Protect the ones who couldn't protect themselves. Tank took another sip of coffee, eyes never leaving the man. The boy Evan, Tank decided to call him, even though he didn't know his name, yet sat frozen, hands folded in his lap, eyes down. The man leaned in close, whispering something that made the boy flinch. Tank's jaw clenched. He thought about his own childhood, his old man's fists, the nights he'd hidden in the garage, curled up next to his bike, wishing anyone would notice, wishing someone would step in. No one ever did. Not until the Marines. Not until he found brothers who gave a damn. And later, not until the bandidos gave him a second family when the first one had burned to ash. He wasn't going to let this kid wait that long. Tank stood, slow, deliberate. The diner went quiet. He crossed the floor, boots heavy on cracked linoleum, and stopped at the man's booth. Smiled. The kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thought you dropped something outside, brother." The man looked up, his face went pale. I don't think so." "You sure?" Tank's voice was calm, too calm. Looked like something important. The man's hand twitched toward his jacket pocket. His eyes darted to the door, then back to Tank. "I'm fine. We're fine." Tank leaned in. "Just a little, just enough." "What unit you serve with?" The man blinked. 82nd Airborne." "Yeah? Where'd you deploy?" "Iraq. Afghanistan. Couple Place." "Which base?" The man hesitated. "Bagram." Tank's smile didn't move. "Funny. I was in Bagram for 6 months. Never saw Navy SEALs running around with the 82nd. The man's face went from pale to grey. "Must have been different rotations," he stammered. Tank straightened, looked down at the boy. The kid's eyes were wet, pleading, desperate. "You take care now," Tank said quietly. Then, louder, to the man. The words tasted like ash. Tank walked back to his booth, sat down. His brothers were already moving into position. The man knew. Tank could see it in the way his hands shook, the way his knee bounced under the table, the way his eyes kept flicking toward the exits. He was going to run, and when he did, the bandidos would be waiting. Because in America, the system moved slow. Paperwork, red tape, proof, procedure. But out here, on the back roads of Oklahoma, in diners where the law was 20 minutes away on a good day, justice moved faster, and it wore patches. Tank pulled out his phone, texted Bear. He runs, we follow. No one touches him. We do this clean. Bear's reply came instantly. Roger that. Tank looked up. The man was standing now, gripping the boy's arm, pulling him toward the back. The kitchen. Tank's pulse kicked. He stood again. Didn't run, didn't shout. Just said one word, brothers. And every bandido in the diner rose as one. The kitchen doors slammed open. Pots clattered, a cook shouted, the waitress screamed. The man dragged Evan through the chaos, knocking over a tray of dishes, shoving past a dishwasher who stumbled backward into the sink. Tank followed, calm, controlled. He'd chased insurgents through the streets of Fallujah. This was nothing. Behind him, his brothers fanned out. Ghost went left, circling toward the side alley. Wrench went right, covering the front. Bear stayed on Tank 6, moving like a shadow. The man hit the back door hard, bursting into the alley behind the Dusty Spoon. Sunlight, dumpsters, grease stains on cracked asphalt, the distant hum of I-40 traffic. And 2 bandidos already waiting. Tiny and Colt stood at the far end of the alley, arms crossed, blocking the only exit. The man froze. His head whipped around, saw Tank stepping out of the kitchen, saw Bear behind him, saw Ghost emerging from the side. Trapped. End of the line, amigo, Bear said quietly. The man's breathing went ragged, his eyes wild. He shoved Evan toward the dumpsters and reached into his jacket. Tank's heart stopped. Gun? Knife? Knife. A cheap folding blade, but sharp enough to kill. The man held it out, hand shaking, backing toward the wall. Stay back, I'll use it. Tank didn't move, didn't blink. You don't want to do that, brother. I'm not your brother. No, Tank said quietly. You're not. Evan scrambled to his feet, ran, not away, toward Tank. The boy crashed into Tank's legs, small arms wrapping around his waist, face buried in leather and denim. Tank's hand came down instinctively, resting on the boy's head. Protective, gentle. I got you, Tank murmured. You're safe. The man lunged. Tank moved. One step, one pivot. He caught the man's wrist mid-swing, twisted, and drove him face first into the brick wall. The knife clattered to the ground. The man screamed. Tank didn't let go. He pulled the man's arm behind his back, controlled, precise, the way the Marines had taught him. Stay down, Tank said, voice like gravel. Don't make this worse. The man thrashed. Tank applied pressure, not enough to break, just enough to stop. Bear kicked the knife away. Ghost pulled out his phone, already dialing. Sheriff's on the way, Ghost said. Sirens wailed in the distance. Tank held the man down, one knee on his back, until 2 squad cars pulled into the alley. Sheriff Daniels stepped out, mid-50s, grey mustache, worn boots, and a look that said he'd seen this dance before. Tank, he said, not friendly, not hostile, just tired. Sheriff. Daniels looked at the man on the ground, then at Evan clinging to Tank's leg, then at the 6 bandidos standing in a loose circle. You want to tell me what happened? Tank handed him the napkin. Daniels read it. His face went hard. Son of a bitch. He knelt next to the man, pulled him up, cuffed him. You got a name? The man spat, said nothing. Daniels sighed, looked at Tank. We've been looking for this guy. 2 missing kid reports out of Texas. Didn't know he crossed state lines. Tank's stomach turned. 2 kids. Daniels looked down at Evan. "Son, we're going to get you home, I promise." Evan shook his head violently. "No," he whispered. "I can't go home. My real dad, my dad is missing." The world tilted. Tank looked down at the boy, at the tears streaming down his face, at the way his small hands gripped Tank's vest like it was the only solid thing left in the universe. And Tank realized this wasn't over. It was just beginning. The sheriff's office smelled like burnt coffee, old paperwork, and fluorescent lights that buzzed too loud. Evan sat in a plastic chair, legs swinging, not quite reaching the floor, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, a juice box in his hands, unopened. Tank stood against the wall, arms crossed, watching. Sheriff Daniels sat across from the boy, voice soft, patient. "Evan, I need you to tell me about your dad, his name, where you lived, anything you remember." Evan's voice was small, broken. Michael Hayes. We lived in Tulsa. He worked at the plant. He went to work 3 weeks ago and never came back." Daniels wrote it down. "Did he say anything before he left? Anything unusual?" Evan shook his head. "He just said he loved me, that he'd be home for dinner." His voice cracked. "But he didn't come home." Tank's chest tightened. He knew that feeling. The waiting. The hoping. The slow, crushing realization that the person you loved wasn't coming back. He'd felt it when his unit lost Rodriguez in Ramadi, when they couldn't recover the body for 3 days. He'd felt it when his own father walked out and never looked back. And now this kid, this brave, terrified kid, was living it. Daniels leaned back. "We'll look into it, Evan, I promise. But right now, we need to figure out where you're going to stay." "No." Evan's voice was sharp, desperate. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying with him." He pointed at Tank. Daniels looked at Tank, raised an eyebrow. Tank didn't move. "Kid doesn't know me," Tank said quietly. "I don't care," Evan said, voice stronger now. "You helped me. You saved me. I trust you." Daniels sighed, rubbed his face. "Tank, you know I can't just hand him over. CPS has protocols, foster placement, background checks." "I know, but—" Daniels hesitated. "I also know the system, and I know it fails kids like Evan every damn day." He looked at Tank, really looked at him. "You willing to take temporary custody, supervised, check-ins, paperwork up the ass?" Tank's jaw worked. He thought about his life, his trailer, his bike, his brothers. He thought about the charity rides, the vets they'd pulled off the streets, the families they'd fed when the government checks ran out. He thought about the code, never leave a brother behind. And this kid had slipped a note into his pocket and trusted him with his life. That made him family. "Yeah," Tank said, "I'm willing." Evan's face lit up. The first real smile Tank had seen. Daniels nodded. "All right, I'll make the calls. But Tank, if we find his dad, or if CPS decides otherwise." "I know," Tank said. "I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm just trying to keep him safe." Daniels stood, extended his hand. Tank shook it. "For what it's worth," Daniels said quietly, "you did good today." Tank didn't answer. He just looked down at Evan, who was staring up at him like he'd just met a superhero. And Tank realized something. He wasn't running from his past anymore. He was building a future, one scared kid at a time. The Bandidos Clubhouse sat on the edge of Tulsa, Oklahoma, a low-slung building with peeling paint, a gravel lot, and a row of Harleys parked out front like sentries. Inside it smelled like motor oil, leather, and the kind of coffee that could strip paint. Tank sat at the long table, Evan beside him, wrapped in an oversized Bandidos hoodie that hung past his knees. Around them, the brothers gathered. Bear, Ghost, Wrench, Tiny, Colt, Reaper, and a dozen more. Men who'd served, men who'd bled, men who'd come home to a country that didn't know what to do with them. Men who'd found family in patches and engines and the open road. "All right," Tank said. "Here's what we know. Evan's dad, Michael Hayes, disappeared 3 weeks ago, last seen leaving the Tulsa industrial plant. No body, no leads, no ransom. Cops?" Bear asked. "Filed a missing person report. Went nowhere." Ghost leaned forward. "So what are we thinking? Foul play?" "Has to be," Tank said. "Guy doesn't just vanish. Not with a kid at home." Wrench tapped the table. "We got contacts at the plant?" "I'll make calls," Colt said. "I know a guy in the union." Tiny cracked his knuckles. "What about the Predator? He talk?" "Not yet," Tank said, "but Daniels is working him. If there's a connection, we'll find it." Evan looked up at Tank. "You really think you can find my dad?" Tank met his eyes, didn't lie. "I don't know, kid, but I promise you this, we're going to try. And when a bandido makes a promise, he keeps it." Evan nodded. Believed him. Because in 3 days, Tank had done more for him than the system had done in 3 weeks. Later, after the meeting, Tank stood outside, cigarette burning between his fingers, staring at the Oklahoma sky. Ghost joined him. "You good, brother?" Tank didn't answer right away. "I keep thinking about Rodriguez," he said finally. Ghost went quiet. They all remembered Rodriguez. "We couldn't save him," Tank said. "We tried, but we were too late." "This isn't Ramadi, Tank." "I know." Tank exhaled smoke, "but it feels the same, like if I don't move fast enough, another kid loses his father." Ghost clapped him on the shoulder. "Then we move fast." Inside, Evan sat at the table, drawing on a napkin. Bear sat beside him, showing him how to sketch a motorcycle. "Your dad ride?" Bear asked. Evan shook his head. "No, but he always said he wanted to. Said maybe one day we'd get a bike and ride across America together." Bear smiled. "That's a good dream, kid." Evan looked up. "Do you think, if we find him, Tank would teach us?" Bear's smile widened. "Brother, I know he would." And in that moment, in a clubhouse full of men the world had written off as thus and outlaws, a little boy found something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. The sun rose over Route 66, painting the Oklahoma plains in gold and crimson. 6 bandidos rode in formation, engines rumbling like thunder, colors flying. Tank led. Evan stayed behind with Daniels and a trusted brother's wife, safe, fed, protected. But emotionally, Evan rode with them. They were headed to a truck stop outside Amarillo, Texas. Colt's union contact had whispered a name, Ricky Voss, a foreman at the plant. A man who'd been asking questions about Michael Hayes the week before he disappeared. A man who'd suddenly stopped showing up to work. The ride was long, quiet. Tank's mind drifted. He thought about the last time he'd ridden this road. 5 years ago, coming back from a funeral in Albuquerque. A brother who'd eaten his gun after the VA turned him away for the 3rd time. 22 vets a day. That's what the statistics said. 22 men and women who came home from war and couldn't find a reason to stay. Tank had almost been number 23, but the bandidos pulled him back, and now he was pulling someone else. They pulled into the truck stop just after noon. The place was a sprawl of diesel pumps, a diner, a motel, and a bar that looked like it had seen better decades. Inside the bar, the air was thick with smoke and regret. Tank walked in first. His brothers fanned out behind him. The bartender, a woman in her 50s with hard eyes and a cigarette hanging from her lip, looked up. "We don't want trouble." "Neither do we," Tank said. "We're looking for Ricky Voss." Her eyes flicked toward the back corner. A man sat alone, thin, nervous, drinking whiskey at 1 in the afternoon. Tank approached, sat down across from him. "Ricky." The man looked up, saw the patches, went pale. "I didn't do anything." "Didn't say you did," Tank said calmly. "But you knew Michael Hayes." Ricky's hands shook. I can't talk about that." "Why not?" "Because they'll kill me." Tank leaned in. "Who's they?" Ricky downed his whiskey, poured another. "Look, man," Michael was asking questions. About shipments, about guys who weren't on the books, about trucks that came and went in the middle of the night. Tank's pulse quickened. "What kind of shipments?" Ricky looked around, whispered. "The kind you don't ask about, the kind that get people disappeared." Bear stepped closer. "You saying Michael stumbled onto something?" "I'm saying Michael was a good man who stuck his nose where it didn't belong. And now he's gone." "Where?" Tank's voice was steel. Ricky hesitated. Tank didn't. He reached across the table, grabbed Ricky's wrist, not hard, just firm. "That man has a son. A little boy who slipped a note into my pocket because he had no one else to turn to. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Where?" Ricky broke. "There's a warehouse outside Gaiman, off Route 54. That's where they took him. That's where they take all of them." Tank let go. "Stoot. Thank you." Ricky looked up. "You're going after him?" "Yeah." "You're going to get yourself killed." Tank smiled. Cold. Hard. Wouldn't be the first time someone tried. They walked out into the sunlight. Bear looked at Tank. "We calling Daniels?" "Yeah, but we're not waiting." Ghost grinned. "Damn right we're not." They mounted up. Engines roared. And the bandidos rode toward Guymon, Oklahoma. Toward a warehouse. Toward answers. Toward a fight. The warehouse sat like a scar on the Oklahoma plains. Rusted metal, broken windows, a single access road that hadn't seen maintenance in a decade. No signs, no lights, no life, except for the 2 trucks parked out back. Tank and his brothers parked a quarter-mile out, hidden behind a ridge. Daniels and 2 deputies were 10 minutes behind. But Tank wasn't waiting. Not when Michael Hayes might be inside. Not when Evan was back in Tulsa, waiting for news. They moved in on foot. Silent. Tactical. Years of training kicked in. Hand signals, cover, spacing. Ghost picked the lock on the side door. They slipped inside. The warehouse was a maze of crates, tarps, and shadows. And then Tank heard it. A cough. Weak, ragged. He moved toward the sound. In the back corner, behind a stack of pallets, a man sat slumped against the wall. Dirty. Bloodied. Barely conscious. but alive. "Michael?" Tank whispered. The man's eyes fluttered open. Who are you?" "A friend of your son's." Michael's face crumpled. "Evan? Is he? He's safe. He's with me." Michael sobbed. "Thank God. Thank God." Tank cut the zip ties around Michael's wrists, helped him stand. "Can you walk?" "I'll crawl if I have to." Bear appeared. "We got company. 2 guys out front." Tank nodded. "Get him out. I'll handle it." "Tank, go." Bear and Ghost half-carried Michael toward the side door. Tank stayed behind. 2 men entered, armed, angry. "Who the hell are you?" Tank stepped into the light. Patches visible. "I'm the guy who's shutting you down." One of them raised a gun. Tank moved. Fast, brutal, efficient. A disarm, a takedown, a chokehold. Both men on the ground in seconds. Sirens wailed outside. Daniels burst in, deputies behind him. He looked at Tank, at the 2 men on the floor, at the evidence scattered around the warehouse. "Jesus, Tank. They're all yours, Sheriff." Outside, Michael sat in the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket, tears streaming down his face. "My son, I need to see my son." Tank knelt beside him. "You will. I promise." Michael grabbed Tank's hand. "Thank you. I don't know how to." "You don't have to," Tank said. "Just be there for him. That's all he wants." And as the sun set over the Oklahoma plains, Tank realized something. He hadn't just saved a man. He'd saved a family. The reunion happened in the hospital. Evan sat in a chair, swinging his legs, nervous. Tank stood beside him. "What if he doesn't remember me?" Evan whispered. Tank smiled. "He remembers, kid. Trust me." The door opened. Michael walked in, bandaged, limping, but alive. Evan froze. Then he ran. "Dad!" Michael dropped to his knees, arms open, and caught his son. They held each other, sobbing, shaking. Tank turned away, gave them space, but Michael looked up. "Wait." Tank stopped. Michael stood, still holding Evan, and walked over. "You saved my life. You saved my son. I don't know how to repay that." Tank shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do." Michael extended his hand. "Brother." Tank took it, and in that moment, the world saw what it always missed. Bikers weren't the monsters. They were the ones who showed up when everyone else walked away. 6 months later, the Bandidos held their annual charity ride through Tulsa. Hundreds of bikes, thousands of dollars raised, homeless vets fed, kids' hospital donations made. And, at the front of the pack, riding beside Tank, was a little boy named Evan, helmet on, grin wide, holding tight. Behind them, Michael rode his own bike, a gift from the club. At the end of the ride, Evan handed Tank a folded piece of paper. Tank opened it. A drawing, a biker and a little boy, standing side by side, and underneath, in careful handwriting, "My friend, forever." Tank knelt down, pulled Evan into a hug. "Forever, kid." And as the sun set over Oklahoma, the world kept crossing the street when Tank Walker walked by. But somewhere in that same world, a little boy and his father would never have to cross the street alone. All because one scared kid slipped a note into the pocket of the scariest-looking man in the room, and found a hero instead. If you believe that sometimes the hero is the man the world fears most, and that brotherhood, loyalty, and courage matter more than patches or prejudice, like and share this story. Subscribe now for more stories that prove bikers are the protectors society refuses to see. And don't miss the 2 videos on your screen right now. They're specially crafted for you, and they'll hit just as hard. Ride safe, family. We'll see you on the next one.